Can we use your timer?
Yes, it'll be right there.
Okay, thanks. Hi again. I'm Karen Alcoholic still.
Karen.
Let's see. Boy, thank you so much, Casey. I just really appreciate hearing your story. My story's a little different, as everyone's story is. I grew up in a family that moved a fair amount, and not because of the military, but because my dad could never quite settle down, and he just changed jobs. And so it was not unusual for me as a kid and then in school to always be the new person in the class. And that was what I knew. And I would start the school year not knowing anybody and end up making friends. And I just always had this sense that, I was different because we always moved into these nice residential areas with a lot of kids. So everybody knew everybody already. And then me and my two younger sisters would show up and fit ourselves in. And, I just never really thought about it, except that, I expected to feel uncomfortable and self-conscious. That was my way. And then as I got into junior high and then beginning high school, I always had friends. I usually had like a couple of really good girlfriends, and I liked to play. And but I would just see all these kids that looked to me to be really cool and have a lot of friends, and they would party. And I grew up in a fairly conservative Christian family that went to church every Sunday. And once we moved to Illinois, we were living in the town that my mother had grown up in. And my grandparents and some other people in that generation were very involved in this church. And so the family had a name and a reputation. And as I started to try to do things more on my own, I always would find out, well, what will the neighbors think? What will God think? And that was just the foundational principle for why we would do anything, was because of what we had to think about, what God would think about it. And I never realized how ingrained that was in my psyche and my soul until I got into drinking. And in high school, I started dating the guy that was sharing a desk with me in my ornamental horticulture class, which was like my favorite class in high school. And he was the captain of the football team, and he was very gregarious. And so we enjoyed flirting with each other. And he was a big partier. He was a football player. And so I was very excited about this because this was totally different. And it was I knew my parents wouldn't approve of this. And so I had this little life at school that was separate from my dutiful eldest daughter life that I tried to maintain at home. And, I couldn't have fun. I lived with this, what will God think if I get drunk? What will God think if I kiss this guy? What will God think? And that really ruled my life. And I fought that. And I had no tools for fighting it. My family did not talk about anything that wasn't visible. So we never had good, deep conversations or anything like that. So I was good at figuring out how to deal with the situation. And I drank, I partied, and I also felt guilty. the whole time. And I went off to college, and I ended up at this big party school in Iowa because there was no way I was going to stay in Illinois. I wanted out of the Midwest. I wanted to go east. But somehow I ended up in Iowa at a big party school. And on a certain, I had a good time. I was able to drink enough there and have a group of friends that sort of helped me ease me out of the what will God think part of it. I had a roommate who was a minister's daughter, and she was a big radical person. And so I just followed her and did what she did, and it worked. And then I did get out of the Midwest, and I went east for the rest of my college, and that was I had a really good time drinking and smoking and just being part of this brand new scene with people who had very different backgrounds from me, but I never lost that I'm different. Like, what's wrong with me? I can't quite fit in. I don't quite get what everybody else seems to have. And I just carried that with me. And I graduated. I moved to Memphis. I had a job in Memphis I hated, and then I had a job in Memphis that I loved. And I ended up in Seattle after that because I had gone hitchhiking up the West Coast after I graduated from college, and I had a fabulous time. And one of the things I have found in my life to be true is, like, when I travel, when I'm off on an adventure, I don't think of drinking. But the rest of my life, like when I'm living my life, I just want to drink. I can make it through the day and I go home. I had jobs and I would go home and drink it in the evening. And it wasn't every day, but it was like it helped me make my day, make my work. It was tolerable. And when I moved out here, I really started drinking. And I had, it's like I just sort of went with the flow, trying to fit in, trying to make things work, not having much insight into myself because I never talked about any of this. It was all this active life in my head. And so people, it really, I don't know exactly what people thought of me because I never asked. I didn't tell people what I thought of them or anything, because if you didn't talk about it, it didn't exist. And that, so I just settled in here. I tried to prove to myself that I could be an adult, and the way I was going to do that is by living in Seattle for somewhere between 5 to 10 years. And I can tell you now that I have lived here over 45 years, and it doesn't mean I'm an adult. And it was like I realized length of time doing anything has no relationship to whether you're mature or not mature or what. But I don't know. I couldn't live without alcohol. I kept, and I think I was living this life out here of like perpetual seeking. And I kept thinking, like, if I just did this new thing, if I just reached a little bit further, everything would be okay. And I had friends and alcohol and parties and activities to sort of keep myself going. But I could never solve that internal issue that I had. And it got to be frustrating. The stakes got higher. and I thought that things were going to fall apart. I kept thinking like I was going to get fired from my job. I would make up these doomsday scenarios, and they actually didn't happen, but in my head they would happen, and my body would react like they were happening, and even though they weren't. And so at one point, I was in grad school, and I had a friend who, I was in the business school at the UW, and I had a good friend there, and she was going to go off and be a minister. And she said, Karen, I really think you might want to go to church. And so I did for a little bit, and I actually realized that there was a bigger world with bigger problems than just my problems. And so I did what I guess is called a geographic. I quit my job and I went traveling for a year and a half. And I did not have any alcohol during that time. I was so in love with what I was doing, and I ended up going around the world and just in all these interesting countries, interesting stories, and my theme was religion and spirituality. And so I tried to study the religion where I went, and I was just got absorbed in it. I had a spiritual experience on top of Mount Sinai, and I did find God up there. It didn't seem to solve any of my problems, though, and because I was just searching, I couldn't stop. And I came back to Seattle, and I thought, oh, I have to get back to my nonprofit roots, because I was doing nonprofit work primarily. And so I started writing grants for friends, and I sort of picked up where I left off, and all my friends were still here and partying and drinking, and I just kept going, and I was drinking more, and I was really depressed on the inside. And how much time? Okay. And I thought, I really need to probably stop drinking. Throughout all of this that I've been saying, I also was going to therapy. Never talked about drinking. I never saw a relationship between what I needed to talk about with a therapist and alcohol. It just, they didn't need to know, because it wasn't really a problem. And I started sort of testing the idea with my therapist, and I'd say, oh, well, I had a few drinks last night, and just bringing it up, because I just was worried if I started talking about it, something bad would happen. And she didn't bite. She didn't ask me any questions. She didn't follow up on it. She never asked me how much I drank. And I remember just thinking I have to do something, and it was like the pressure was building. And part of the reason the pressure was building was because I was getting older, and I kept remembering when I was in probably 8th or 9th grade, I made a pact with myself that I would take care of myself physically, and eat well and exercise well and look good, because I like to sew and I like to look good in junior high and high school. And then when I was old, I would let myself, I could do whatever I wanted. I would, like, all barriers came down. And in that little brain I had then, 60 was old. And I think my grandparents might have been that age. And so there came this time when I became 59, and I was like starting to freak out, because I'd never fulfilled this pact that I had made with myself. And I started panicking, and I thought, well, I can switch the pact. I can just, live my life and drink now. And then when I turn 60, I can stop drinking and I'll be happy, and I'll be healthy and do all these other good things. I'll take care of myself when I turn 60. Well, I had been trying to stop drinking, and when I turned 59, I started to realize that there was a good chance I wasn't going to be able to stop drinking on my own, because I hadn't for about 20 odd years. And I really tried in earnest to stop drinking, and literally nothing changed about my behavior. And I was getting more and more anxious. And I have a friend, and she's in this room, and she and I had done drinking together and hanging out and talking about creative intellectual ideas. And I knew she had gotten sober, and I finally, one day we were sitting over at her house, and instead of red wine, we were having tea, and I just asked her, "Do you think you're as creative as you are, as you were when you were drunk and stoned?" And I expected her to give me some nuanced answer, but the answer was, I actually do. In fact, I think I'm more creative. And that blew my mind. I could not believe that. And I said, oh, I just tried to be nonchalant about it. And so I had a couple months left before I was going to turn 60, and the pressure was on, and I went to Seward Park, and I just said, okay, I'm going to make the decision on what to do now as I'm walking around the park. And I basically took every issue I thought I had in my life, and I put it up on a pedestal, and I thought, okay, if I dedicated myself 100% to this, would it solve my life? Would it solve my problems? And I started, and I was actually being honest with myself, and I could see like every issue I put up there about whether it was procrastination or not exercising regularly, not paying my bills on time, not doing this, not doing that, and I could tell that even if I took care of that problem, my life was still going to be a mess. And then it got down to the end, and I was so angry, and I refused to put it up on that pedestal, and I had to because I was still walking around Seward Park. And so I put drinking up there, and the second it went up there, my life just calmed down, and I knew that my life would change. And I just thought, shit. And I was so angry, and I was mad that nobody had told me that they thought I had a drinking problem, or that they were upset with me about the way I was behaving. There's literally nothing. And so then I thought, okay, what do I do now? And I was like, oh, I have to talk to Judith. And then I had to deal with if I say anything out loud about this, the earth is going to open up and I'm going to fall in. And so I asked her to go out on a walk, and we were out walking. And then I just said, Judith, I think I may have a problem possibly with drinking. And, and she gave me the perfect AA answer. And, what makes you say that? And she was very nonchalant about it. And then, there's this great women's meeting I go to on Saturdays. You're welcome to come sometime. I'll take you. And it's like, oh, okay, thank you. And so then I had 2 weeks to go before my birthday. And so I called her up and I said, when was that meeting again? Even though I knew exactly when it was. And she told me. I said, well, I think I want to go. So she took me on December 20th, 2014. And 6 days later, I turned 60. And I haven't had a drink since December 19th, 2014. And it's just, I was in that meeting this morning, and we read the 9-step promises at the end of it. And as we were reading them today, I just thought, every single one of them has impacted my life at this point in time. And my sense of freedom today that brings me new happiness is my little grandniece and nephew up on Camino Island. It's like it's having a surprising experiences with my sister, who is one of the most difficult people in my life right now, and has been for a while. There's a part of me that would like to wish that I had stopped drinking when I first identified it in my journal, which was 40 years ago. And just think what could have happened. But, it's like, I also probably would have never gotten here. And I have to say that being able to wake up in the morning and not have foggy brain, not have hangover, not have, any one of like a lot of stupid things, it's such a blessing. And finding my hope again. One thing I forgot to mention was that about 6 weeks before my birthday, I woke up and I just thought, who the F am I kidding? Because I would just go to bed at night saying, I won't drink tomorrow. And then by 10 in the morning, I was ready for my first glass of wine, even though it had to wait till after work. And once I lost my hope that I would actually change, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, but it was also the scariest thing that ever happened to me, because I realized I had no guardrails and my life was diving down really, really fast. I did not know how to put any boundaries on myself, and I'm just fortunate that it lasted a short period of time, because I was. It was the word. I've been diagnosed clinically depressed before in my life, and this was, in my memory of that experience, this was worse than that. So I don't know what I would have done. Comprehending serenity. I got into meditation class. I'd taken one over in Thailand back in the early 90s, but I never did anything with it because I am a very undisciplined person. And that learning about the concept of serenity and equanimity, that I have been able to apply in my work life. And I do temp work at King County Elections, and this election was very, very stressful. And living this program has helped me take these concepts that I try to apply to the alcoholic mind, which does go with me into work, but to be able to recognize that I have a responsibility to my employer, and to be nonpartisan, and to treat every ballot the same. And I could have never done anything because I liked getting upset about stuff. I liked having an attitude, and I appreciate not. I still have it, but it's not like, it doesn't define me. It just defines maybe some of my values or something. I don't know. I feel very useful. I am of help to my niece and nephew on Camino. I do corrections. I love that. It's, I love doing service in my home groups. I do little things on my block, and to this day, literally 0 people in the world know what I do, and I feel it makes me feel good, which is the benefit of doing it. and I just, as my sponsor has reminded me regularly over the last 10 years almost, this is a program of right sizing. And when I find I'm right sized, I can accept anything. I got some news about my nephew in Texas who comes out here every January to visit recently. And I realized, it's a fact of life. He likes my other sister's family better. They're more like him. They have kids his age. I have me. I have, I have my friends that are different from, I can accept reality and I don't obsess about it, which is 100% different from what it used to be. And I just am happy to be alive. I'm happy to be a member of the human race. I'm happy that I feel very lucky that I found the meetings that I go to regularly that support me, and I am so grateful to my sponsor and to all my friends that help remind me where some of these sober guardrails are that help keep me within the boundaries that I actually want to be in, and that I have, I can exercise some control there, and realizing that there are things I can't control and that it's not my job to control has been a huge gift to me, because I like to control things. And so I'm just really grateful to get to tell this story, my story. And I just want to say that, so I have another birthday coming up in about 6 weeks. And I will have gone a full decade without drinking, which I can't say since I started drinking when I was about 15. So I'm just really grateful to be here. Thank you.